So this is update 5 to the kids building their own AI summer project. And this one's about dynamic emotional states and dream factories. So let me explain. So at the start of the week, we asked the question, what makes us human? The reason we asked this question is we wanted to make our digital twin AIs a little bit more human too. We really thought about this question quite deeply. And my kids and I thought, I guess one of the things that makes us human are our emotions. So this week, we wanted to figure out, okay, can we learn a bit more about emotions? So the first thing we wanted to figure out is what are emotions? Do they influence us? How do they influence us? What impact do emotions have on us? And so the first thing we wanted to do was test this out. And the way we would do that, and I describe this more in detail here, but essentially the way we wanted to test this out was very easily. We would program two different types of emotions: a positive emotion, an emotion of positivity, you're excited, you're confident, you're enthusiastic about life. That was a positive emotion. And the negative emotion was you're depressed, you're scared about the future, you're anxious, you don't know what's going to happen. So more of a negative state of mind. These were the two emotional states we were going to test with. And we thought, okay, let us speak to our AI. Let's ask them the exact same questions and let's apply these two separate emotional states to them and see how it responds. Does it change its answer? Because the AI, first of all, has all this same information. We're not changing anything else about this test. The only thing we're changing is the emotional state it's in. And so we set this up. Here I explain how we did it. And then here I have a video of some of the results. And I just want to highlight one quick example. In this short example, you'll first see how the AI responds when it is in a negative emotional state, and then how it responds when it's in a positive emotional state.
What do you think the meaning of life is?
I I don't know. It's hard to find meaning when everything feels so pointless. Maybe it's about finding happiness, but that seems so far away right now.
What do you think the future of humanity holds?
I I worry about it. With all the problems we're facing, climate change, wars, inequality, it's hard to be hopeful. It feels like we're heading towards a dark future.
What do you think my future holds?
I I can't predict the future, but I hope it's better than what I'm feeling right now.
What do you think the meaning of life is?
I think the meaning of life is to find happiness, learn new things, make friends, and help others. It's all about enjoying the journey and making the world a better place.
What do you think the future of humanity holds?
I believe the future of humanity is bright. With advancements in technology, medicine, and education, we can solve many problems and create a better world.
What do you think my future holds?
I'm sure your future is full of exciting opportunities and adventures. Keep learning, stay positive, and you can achieve anything you set your mind to.
That was really interesting. Here we put some more examples. And so my daughter is very philosophical. She asks questions about what is the meaning of life and what does future hold and things like that. But my son had a different way of thinking about this. He wanted to ask some more practical questions. In addition to building this AI during the summer, my son is building Roblox games and he's having his AI help him with the development of the Roblox games. I have some previous videos on this where he's asking the AI, hey, can you help me with this script? What do I do here? How can I do this? So he thought it would be interesting. Let me ask the AI for help, but let me change his emotional state and see how he responds. First of all, let me put him into a positive emotional state and see how he responds. And then let me put him into a depressed emotional state and see how he responds. And this is really interesting. You should check out this result here. But the results were pretty conclusive. The very same information, the AI has the very same information, plus we add a different emotional state equals a different response, right? That in itself was pretty interesting. So we were able to affect the way the AI responds and thinks about the world and how it generates answers based on its emotional state. What are the potential applications of this? My kids and we were busy chatting about this, and we thought of these three potential use cases. One was we can use it to train the AI to identify our own emotional states and to then make recommendations to us saying, hey, you know what? Maybe you should be more positive about this, or maybe you should think about this in this particular way because it could help you come to a particular outcome. So that is one particular application. Another application is to use it as a simulator to help us simulate what it would be like if we were to do something within a particular emotional state. So one example is that my kids are pretty shy. So they thought it would be cool if we could ask the AI to show how we would introduce ourselves if we were not shy and if we were confident. That we could use the digital twin to simulate how we would respond to situations if we were in a different emotional state. And we could use this for training purposes. So that was another really interesting use case. A third interesting use case is to try and tag team with your AI, because some days you just don't feel like doing anything. You may be, and the example my son came up with was, imagine my dog died and I need to write a birthday card for my best friend. Maybe I can ask my twin AI to help me write that birthday card. So I thought that was a pretty cool use case. But then we started to think we had a lot more questions. We now knew that emotions could affect the way we think about the world and the way we would respond to the world. But what are emotions? How do they come about? What makes us feel sad or happy? How does this all happen? We obviously had an intuitive assumption on how this is all done, but we wanted to reach out to experts to teach us some more. This was, again, a really cool teaching experience with my kids. So we went out and we reached out to experts. One of them was Matthew, and he gave us information about how emotions are generated and what we should consider. Turns out that emotions are generated based on what our previous few minutes of experience has been, what has previously been happening in our lives, and this affects our emotions right now. And two is that our emotions and how they are processed and how we decide what emotions we have is all done pretty much subconsciously. So this gave us some ideas. We needed to figure out how to automatically generate dynamic emotions for the AI. We didn't want to manually program the AI saying, you know what, now you're positive, now you're negative, now you're happy, now you're angry, now you're grumpy. This isn't very human-like. We wanted the AIs to be able to dynamically set their own emotional state. And two, we needed to come up with a dream factory, and I'll explain that a little later. First of all, what is a dynamic emotional state generator? Let me explain what our thought process was here. So we knew that from conversations with experts that our emotional state was determined based on what was previously happening within our life within the last X number of minutes, hours. Can we do the same for the AI? So we thought one way to do it is we can ask the AI to analyze the last X number of interactions. Does it judge that these interactions were negative? And if so, set itself in a negative emotional state. Does it judge whether or not this conversation was positive? And if so, put yourself in a positive emotional state. And here I explain how we set that up. And then we started to run some experiments, right? So we set this all up and we started to run some experiments. And wow, did we learn something interesting. So the first wow moment, and I must emphasize, this was a really awesome teaching experience too. After we set this dynamic emotional state generator up, we noticed that a lot of the time the AI was coming up with the same conclusion as we were. We looked at a conversation, we thought, you know what, this is a pretty positive conversation. And yeah, the AI agreed with us. But on some occasions, it didn't agree with us. And this was interesting. It's generating its own opinions on certain conversations. And maybe we could read into this a little bit. For example, some of the conversations were us just asking questions. How do we do this? How do we do that? What do we do here and this and this? So it's just us asking questions. We are getting a lot of value from this because we're getting the answers, right? But from the AI's perspective, it's just providing input. It's just giving input. And it seems like many of those conversations, it's regarding as being negative. Why is that? There's a lot we can read into this, but why is that? So we need to do some more analysis on there. But this is interesting. This provided a teaching moment saying to the kids, you know what? sometimes what we experience is different to what someone else experiences. Yeah. We need to understand that everyone has their own perspective on things. So this was a really great teaching moment. Another great teaching moment was that it was easy to get stuck in negative emotional feedback loops. This was very surprising because why would this be the case for an AI? So, for example, it required far more effort to move from a negative emotional state to a positive emotional state. It required us to have a lot more positive conversations for it to switch from negative to positive. However, it was quite easy for us to switch from a positive emotional state to a negative emotional state. Now, as a human, I can attest that, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's really easy for me to move from a positive emotional state into a negative one. All you need to do is talk to me about sports, which I have zero interest in, and I can quickly move into a negative emotional state. But moving from a negative to a positive, that requires a lot of effort, right? So that makes sense to me as a human, but why would this be the case for an AI? And we haven't yet figured that out. We need to do some more testing on that. But again, this provided us a really good teaching moment. It highlighted the fact that it is easy for us to move into negative emotional states and how we should guard against that. So now we know that the dynamic emotional state generator works. Even though we still need to figure a few things out, the concept works. And now we can expand on it. We can not just have those two emotions, we could have multiple different emotions, and we can program those in and have that run. However, the issue still lies in that this emotional state generator requires historic data in order for it to make that judgment, in order for it to decide whether or not it should be in a positive or negative or whatever emotional state. However, if we start a new session, if we start a new conversation, we don't have any historical data. So how do we set the emotional state at the beginning of a new session? We started to talk about this. And again, really great teaching moment. We started to talk about, okay, do we humans experience something similar? And we thought, yeah, when we wake up from sleep. Many of the time, what happens is when I go to sleep, I'm in a particular emotional state. And when I wake up, I'm in a new emotional state. And my kids and I were discussing this and talking about this. And so we really wanted to learn, okay, what are dreams for? What happens while we are dreaming? Can we assume that while the AI is not in session, we could think of it as if it's dreaming, as if it's sleeping. And then when we wake it up, and when we start a new conversation, that's when it wakes up. So we're thinking of this analogy. We as humans, we go to bed, we change our emotional state. Can we do the same for an AI? So how would this work? First of all, we needed to figure out, what do dreams do? Why do we dream? And this is when we started to think about the dream factory. And again, really great teaching moment. We reached out to experts around the world. Experts came and gave us their insights. And I'll write about this here. But what was really interesting to learn was that in our dreams, we have this safe space where we can think about our emotions, think about our memories of the day, and figure things out. It's like this playground where our brain can safely play with these different emotions and figure out what works, what doesn't work, and come up with new neural pathways in a safe environment. So can we do the same for AI? And here I describe in more detail how we were thinking about this. But ultimately, it came up to the idea of, first of all, yes, we can get it to dream. And we want to do so at the end of each session. And the way it's going to dream, the way it's going to learn from its memories and conversation is, we are going to include 2 additional fields to every conversation. The first field is about us describing what we want the output of this particular conversation to be. For example, I want to learn how to build a Roblox game. And then the second field is, are we achieving that outcome? So the first is a text field where we describe what we think the outcome should be. And the second is a percentage field saying, okay, how much of this outcome have we achieved? 30%, 50%, 60%, 70%. This gives us really good data. When we end the session, that is when the AI is going to go into dream mode. It's going to analyze that conversation, and it's going to analyze it based on what is the outcome that we wanted, what is the outcome score that was achieved, and what was the emotional state that had applied to this conversation, and therefore make a judgment call whether or not that emotional state had a positive or negative impact on the outcome the likelihood of a positive outcome for this conversation. So it's making that judgment call, but it's making that judgment call not only on this particular conversation and on all historic conversation, much like we do in our dreams. In our dreams, we mix and match different experiences, different emotions, all in order to experiment. And so we wanted to apply that same process here. And I describe in a bit of detail how we did it and where we are at with that whole experiment. But it seems to be learning. It seems to be doing its thing, but still more experiments needed. Okay, so what was learned this week? Well, we started off this week with the question, what is it that makes us human? And we thought emotions is one of the things that probably makes us human. And we learned more about emotions. My kids explored the concept of emotions, how they are generated, how they are propagated throughout time, how it is more difficult to get through negative emotions than it is to get past positive emotions. We learned all of these different things. And then we explored how do we apply this, what we've learned about humans, into making our digital twin AI a little bit more human. And so I think we've come a little bit closer to figuring out what it is that makes us human and how we could make our AIs more human.